Let's get into the fun stuff. So today we're here to talk about 5 dashboard pitfalls that I've learned from home ownership and hopefully some useful tips on how to avoid them. By show of hands, who has purchased a home before or plans to or hoping to do so or has helped a family or friend move into a house? Well, you know exactly how exciting but chaotic that situation can be. So this is my wife, Olivia. We bought our first house last year, right before Tableau conference, so I was able to move in and then she was able to do some of the unpacking while I was away. But over the past year, we've learned quite a lot from being first-time homeowners. We'll call them pitfalls for this presentation, but I'm going to go through and kind of show you some examples of what I've learned and how I can apply that to what I do during my day job, which is my building dashboards. So here's our first pitfall that we ran into, right? We had mismatched color palettes, boxes all over the place, and we did drill into a water pipe. So that was a really funny story. It was a whole day of decorating and hanging things up, and this was our last project that we wanted to do and hang this little shelf and drilled into the water pipe, and that turned into about a 2-hour, multiple trips to Home Depot, huge hole in our wall. We've learned a lot. I did have some useful help. So I just like to share this story because we've learned a lot, and I'm excited to kind of take you through this journey of how we see things in homes and how it can apply to our dashboards that we're building. Before we do that, my name is Eric Bolish. I'm a senior BI analyst at Navy Federal Credit Union. When I'm there, what I do is I take data and I help our leaders build dashboards to answer their business questions. And the biggest thing for me is design in dashboards. And this is actually my 10th presentation at Tableau conference. And if you've ever attended one of my sessions before, I always talk about design and how important it is for building accessible dashboards. Outside of that, just in the community, I've been a Tableau visionary for 2 years and a Tableau public ambassador for 5. I actually run a community project called Back to Viz Basics. This project is great if you're just kind of getting started with Tableau. We release challenges every 2 weeks, and it's meant for individuals that are just starting to kind of build those foundational data viz skills. So if you're new to Tableau, this is something that you can do on your own, take back to work just to increase those simple skills. I also host a podcast called Data After Hours, where I talk with industry leaders in the analytics space, and I get to know their hobbies and interests outside of work, so beyond their 9 to 5. So it's, we all love data. We're here to celebrate Tableau and data, but we're all real humans, and we all have interests and hobbies outside of work. So if you'd like to be on the podcast, just reach out to me. I'd love to have you and chat. And this year I didn't include a picture, but I also have a standard poodle named Loki, and I usually have a picture of him. So I'm sorry I let you all down this year on not showing that. All right, here's our agenda. So this is what we're going to cover. Right, a lot of these things might be familiar for us in our homes, right? Too much stuff, hoarding, cluttering, and boxes everywhere. We'll see how these relate to different dashboard principles in a second. Mismatched decor. Does the rug that I have from college really go with that Pottery Barn chair that my wife just purchased? Probably not. Beautiful room untouched, modern and chic, but useless. Unlabeled boxes. I don't know what or where anything is. And waiving the home inspection. I feel like this is a trend we're seeing recently. People want to get in a home so bad that they're waiving the home inspection. Just don't do it. So let's see how these 5 things tied to our dashboards. So the first one, too much stuff, organization. When we moved in, I knew right away that we just had so many boxes. Any quote that we got from a moving company, they were like, wow, you guys are in a townhouse and have this much stuff. It really got to be overwhelming. And I was surprised at how fast our house filled up with everything. Right, this can kind of be like our dashboards, right? How many of us, by show of hands, have opened a dashboard that has, 15 KPIs, 20 filters on the side, a ton of charts, 3 different color palettes, and then no clear story, right? I think all of us are pretty familiar with that. So let's see how we can fix that. So what makes a nice organized dashboard? Well, I like to apply the Marie Kondo method here. So if a chart doesn't spark insight, remove it. If something in your house doesn't fit or it doesn't make sense, maybe it shouldn't be there. So we want to make sure that we're avoiding clutter by only displaying essential information. This can often be hard because there's a lot of data that our leaders might want to see. So we need to think about, well, what's the most impactful thing to answer these key business questions that my stakeholder wants? Using clear and direct labels is really important. We want to make sure that we're labeling our charts and giving them that right context. We're going to dive into context a little bit later. Use tooltips or drill downs for additional detail. Tooltips are somewhat of an underutilized feature within Tableau. I think a lot of us, pretty much use the standard out of the box tooltip. Well, there's a lot of extra detail and information that we can add to that. So that's something that you should probably look into and consider using. And we want to make sure that we're using simple colors and objects for clarity. We don't want to have icons that are, The Vizzies are really, really loud down there, so I apologize. We want to make sure that we're using simple colors and objects for clarity. So if we're using icons, we don't want them to have too much graphic detail. Make sure that they're consistent in their style. We should be using neutral colors for background elements and reserve bright colors for emphasis. Think about in a dashboard when you see just too many color palettes, right? You're not really sure where your eyes should go or what's the most important. So what I like to do is maybe just use 1 to 2 dominant colors to really hone in on a specific detail within my dashboard. And finally, remove unnecessary grid lines or borders that don't add value. Out of the box Tableau, when you create a bar chart or line chart, right, there's a lot of extra lines on there with labels and tick marks. Play around with the features of how you can edit those and maybe bring down, how heavy those lines look, or maybe remove some of the axis labels. Some of that stuff we might not need, especially if we're labeling things within our chart. So play around with the design of that to have a little bit less graphic detail in your dashboards. And finally, really well organized dashboards focus on high impact metrics. So we need to prioritize what matters. Those are our bands and KPIs across the top or down the left-hand side. We typically put them in those positions because that's where they communicate that they're important to our users and they're the numbers that our stakeholders care the most about. So they shouldn't be going down the right-hand side or the bottom. We want to put them in the spot that our eyes should go first. And then as we go down the dashboard, right, we want to make sure that we're ordering by order of importance. So we want to get from that high level information and we want to start to drill down into a little bit more detail. And also maybe a little underutilized is using benchmarks and trends to provide context rather than just static numbers. Play with the analytics tab, add a constant line in there, add an average line or a trend line. Think about how you can incorporate some of those other methods to add a little bit more detail to your dashboards and charts. All right, so what are some ways that we can do this? Well, just like in a house needs spring cleaning, so do our dashboards. So I would think about when you go back to work, what are some ways that we can start to incorporate spring cleaning into our dashboards? Well, get rid of items that don't serve a purpose. Think about ways that you can maybe consolidate the amount of dashboards that you have maybe down into 1 or 2 simple views within a workbook. Make sure that everything has a specific spot on your dashboard for essential items. And we'll take a look at this dashboard in just a second. And again, less is more. Keep your design and decor focused. All right, so this is a dashboard by Ellen Blackburn. She's a Tableau Public author, and this is her demo insurance dashboard. If you're not familiar with Ellen Blackburn or Tableau Public is a great way to get inspiration. She definitely created a profile on there. It's where I go to get ideas for business dashboards. But Ellen Blackburn is probably in my top 3 of Tableau Public authors. Everything that she creates is so well organized and very consistent. What I really love about this dashboard is the balance that you have between the amount of data and insights that are in there and just how simple it looks, right? Like there's a ton of data packed into this dashboard, but it's so well organized that it's just clean and makes sense. Everything that she does is very intentional. I like that she has the banner on the side for navigation and filters and other dashboard information. And then if we just look at designing to a grid, right? We have our KPI section at the top. And then even though we have 6 KPIs there, the 3 are the same width as the charts below it, right? Everything is aligned and it has this very nice consistent flow to it. And then our 2x2 grid, the same width and height for those charts as well, right? Everything's intentional. Consistency is key here. Brings me to my next point. Think about mismatched decor, right? Consistency. So we were so excited to decorate, but when we moved in, some of our rooms, had like the bright coral orange color, we had a light blue color, and just a lot of the colors really seemed off, right? Think about when you walk into a house and, maybe the kitchen has that farmhouse style, and maybe the bedroom is that boho chic style, and then the living room is like modern, right? Everything just seems a little off and it doesn't flow. Well, it turns out that our dashboard design works the same way. So I like to learn from HGTV from this, right? Think about all the shows on HGTV of how they go into the same space, they redesign it with some paint, different paint colors, they add some trim, and it's the same space, but it just looks so much better and different, right? So thinking about inconsistent branding, all of us have an approved marketing style guide from our clients or at our organization. We should be leveraging that in our dashboard design as well, right? We want to make sure that we're branding our things so they look like our own and not just out of the box Tableau. Make your reports look like the organization that you're building them for or that you work for, right? So incorporating those custom color palettes for your organization. Fonts are a little tricky when it comes to Tableau and different operating systems and publishing to cloud and server, so a little leeway there, but incorporate those logos too. Again, you want to make sure that everything is branded just like you would your email signature or another document that you would share out. And again, maintain a uniform layout and design across all reports. If you're going to put your filters on the left-hand side, then most of the dashboards that you build should also have their filters on the left-hand side. Consistency builds trust, right? So if we're always going to put them in that place, and we need to think about our different users, right? We have people that are brand new to Tableau, they're non-technical users, and so if you have your filters on the left and then all of a sudden they're in a show hide container somewhere else, right? They might get a little bit confused and they're going to disengage with what you put out there. So just thinking about trying to have consistency throughout what you're building. Again, the overuse of colors, we kind of talked about this already a little bit, but we don't want to be using too many other dominant colors in our dashboard, right? I like to stick to 1 to 2, maybe sometimes 3 and 4, depending on what I'm looking at, but then I always have kind of like a background lighter color that I use. All right, and then again, thinking about just making things accessible in our dashboards. I know everybody likes to use red for bad, green for blue, but thinking about accessibility and how individuals with different levels of color blindness might see our data. So you can export an image of your dashboard, run it through a color palette generator or color blindness generator, and just see if what you built is an accessible color palette. So maybe just being mindful of that as you're building things. So here's an example of a dashboard that I actually shared 2 years ago at Tableau conference. Now, right away, this seems okay, right? This dashboard isn't terrible. We have some important numbers at the top. We have that nice metadata going down the left-hand side. But something just seems off with that giant white space on the right-hand side with 2 info icons, my filters. And then I always like to ask the question, well, what does blue mean, right? Is blue the category in that top left bar chart? Is blue my conversion rate trend going up in the area chart? Or what's blue mean in that other chart? Right, we don't know. So we need to stay consistent. So if we redesign this, right, into something like this, right, look at how intentional everything feels. We're using the color for emphasis here, right? Highlighting that highest value in a bar chart. That's what I was talking about earlier. You can do this through a simple window calculation. Right, we've used that light gray, that neutral color for the background, and we use the white behind the charts to kind of make it pop off the screen. Our icons are all consistent. And what do I mean by that? I know it might be hard to see on the big screen from where you're sitting, but they're all filled icons, right? We don't have a mix of outlined icons and filled icons. They're consistent. So that's just little design tips that you can take with you that will really elevate your dashboards to that next level. I'm going to call back Ellen Blackburn again. This, I promise, is the only time I'll reference her again in this presentation. But if you go to her Tableau public profile, look at how consistent everything that she builds is. Right? She uses the same color palette throughout, all different types of dashboards, all different types of data, but her brand is consistent throughout. I guarantee you, if you put one of her dashboards in a lineup of 100, I can go through and pick out every single one of hers because I know exactly what her style looks like. This is what I would love for our organization dashboards to look like. This is something that I'm after at my current organization, is just kind of creating that consistent style. So one of my suggestions is to create a branding style guide for Tableau for your organization. So again, incorporating that marketing style guide for the colors and logos and things like that, but maybe creating just a style guide in terms of a template for Tableau workbooks. This can help, for individuals that are newer to building dashboards. They kind of have all that stuff preset for them. So it's something to consider building as well. All right, let's talk about beautiful room untouched functionality. So we have this one room in our house. It's like right when you walk in, right to the right, it's like that formal sitting room. I envision, yeah, I see a lot of nods. A lot of us have that, right? Well, I could probably count on my hands the amount of times that we've used that in the past year, because while it's beautiful with a nice accent wall, beautiful gold painting, leather chairs, like I envision having like cocktails in this room with like friends when they come over, and we don't use it. It's not because it's bad, it's just not functional. And I think a lot of us understand that. So how can we make our dashboards more functional so people start to use them? Well, customization. Thinking about, is this room both adult and kid-friendly? We are building our dashboards for different levels of data literacy. Thinking about who our audience is. Are we building it for our C-suite, or is this for our analyst and business user? Giving the option to have filters and tooltips so they can drill down. Functional dashboards, they help drive better decision making. So having those drill downs are really important so we can help move from these high level numbers into what's actually driving them and that change. I have a leader at work, she says everyone's always giving me these numbers and it's great to see how we're doing, but the first question that I always ask is why? Right? Well, why is it going up? Why is it going down? Giving our users the ability to drill into that data and get to that why is really important. More engaging and interactive. Static dashboards are great, right? We need them at times, just for that quick snapshot of how we're doing. So I understand there's use cases for those, but thinking about, is there any other room, any other place in this room to sit, right? Are there other ways that I can drill into this dashboard so I can pull out those strategic insights to answer my business questions? All right, so we should be holding space for functional and user-friendly design. We're going to go through some of these ways that we can incorporate better functionality into our dashboard. So we're going to talk about prioritizing user control and flexibility, kind of having like open concept living. We'll talk about enabling context exploration, so smart storage and hidden features, and then just having an intuitive flow throughout our dashboards. All right, so this is a dashboard by Tableau public author Autumn Batani. This is her HR diversity scorecard. I think the colors are showing well on the big screen up there, but what I love about this dashboard, I'm gonna flip to a video here, so hopefully it will play, and it does. It's giving me as a user total control to flip through this dashboard. So I can filter by my diverse employees, my female employees, my POC employees, and then I could drive down into these different groups within my dashboard. So now we're looking at tenure, and then I could go up to the top right and change those parameters. So as the user, I have total control over how I want to use this dashboard to see how we're trending. I can open and close different things, and we're gonna talk about the show hide in the next section, but again, this is a great use of dynamic zone visibility and show hide containers within one dashboard. So I just love that as the user, I have total flexibility of how I want to use this dashboard. And everything about it, from the colors, the design, the grid, it's organized and it's consistent. So thinking about our first 2 points. This is another dashboard, OKR's dashboard by Nur Smilga. This is objectives and key results overview. What I like about this one is this is actually one dashboard. So if you open it, this is the first one that you see. But because of dynamic zone visibility and show hide features, we can click through the tiles at the top and it's going to pull up the metrics that I care about throughout the dashboard. And I love that because we're not building things on, we don't have 5 or 6 different dashboards within this workbook. It's all built on one. And so it's just a really great feature of, the way I like to relate it to a home. Do you ever see, I've been seeing this on Instagram Reels, they have the KitchenAid mixers that like go into the cabinet on like a moving tray. Like, I think that's so cool. I would love to put ours away so there's more counter space, but incorporating things like that into our dashboard of the show high. And again, the consistency and organization of this dashboard, everything's aligned, the same spacing and padding, and an accessible color palette throughout. And then our last one, this is from Pradeep Kumar G. This is a web traffic dashboard for digital marketing on his Tableau public profile. I talked about Ellen being in my top 3. I think Pradeep is the other one in my top 3. I actually don't know who my other one is in my top 3, so maybe I'll reveal that at some point. But Pradeep's dashboards, actually, I don't know if it was this one or some other ones, have actually won awards through different organizations just because of his design and flow that he has. And again, just calling out some of the main things here. We have that panel going down the left-hand side for our navigation, our filters, and other information about that dashboard. Then we have that organized flow going from the what, the numbers, and the trend and change down to the why. So drilling into different questions within our dashboard. As we go down, it gets more into that different detail. So just the flow and the structure of this really makes sense, and it's very intentional. All right, number 4, context, unlabeled boxes. So I thought that we did a pretty good job of labeling everything, like the different rooms, and our movers got everything in the right spot, but I didn't realize how many we actually named as like miscellaneous, and those just ended up getting thrown in our basement. And so, right before Tableau conference, I needed zip ties, and I was like, I know exactly where these zip ties should be, and they were not where I thought they were. Turns out they're in one of these miscellaneous boxes just because I didn't label things in the right way. Dashboards with no context can do the same thing to users, right? Let's take a look at this chart. And home relation, right? Think about trying to build IKEA furniture with no instructions, let alone any furniture, right? Probably impossible, unless if you're like my wife, she looks at it for 1 second, she's like, okay, I got it from here. So what does this chart mean, right? Well, is it how much my wife Olivia spends on Amazon every day? Hopefully not. We'd have to have a talk about that. Is it the amount of Instagram reels I watch every day? If it is, I definitely need to detox from my phone a little bit. Or is it some college students' exam scores? I think the average there is about 100 or 90. I think that's pretty good. Right, but we should be adding clear annotations, titles, and labels to our dashboards. Right, this just helps our users understand what they're looking at. Use annotations to highlight key trends. I think that might be a little bit of an underutilized feature within Tableau, but adding an annotation or caption to a specific chart. Making sure, even though if we have labels, they're clear and concise. We don't need a huge giant sentence explaining what's going on. Short and sweet and to the point. Incorporate tooltips for additional details. So we talked about tooltips a little bit earlier, but right, we don't want to overclutter or overpopulate our tooltips. That doesn't mean I need to add every single metric that I have to that tooltip, or with the Viz and tooltip feature, I don't need to add every single chart in there for that additional detail. Just it starts to be too much, right? So just again, being intentional with what we're putting in there. And again, using reference lines for benchmarks or showing our averages to target or goals, rather than just showing the actual number. Well, what % of the way are we there? And showing that in our visual. Using our color-coded thresholds to visually indicate performance as well. Using those positive colors for a positive goal and using the negative colors for a negative goal, like we saw in Autumn's dashboard. All right, I'm gonna blow this up in a second, but I kind of want to show you the functionality within this dashboard as well as the context. So it may be a little bit hard to see, but as we hover over the tooltip that's popping up there, rather than it just being the out-of-the-box tooltip, Varun Jain here has actually turned it into a sentence. So it's guiding my user on what's gonna happen when they click on these different buttons, right? So it says, click on this to change this. And then he has an overlay in the top right corner that actually gives my user a whole user guide of instructions of how to use this dashboard, how things are calculated, right? This is so good and so important to build trust and consistency within our dashboards. So let's blow this up just a little bit more. All right, so like I said, this is from Tableau Public author Varun Jain. This is probably the best example of a user guide that I've seen built into a dashboard. One, I love the design of this dashboard. I love the colors. I love the layout. Everything just makes sense. It flows well, and it's really cool. But the first big thing that I'll call out is all of the information going down the left-hand side, right? It tells us what this dashboard provides for us. It tells us where our data is coming from and everything that we need to know about how to use it. Giving our users the information like this will just make them build trust in that dashboard and make them feel more comfortable. Right, and then it tells us how to read a product combination. So I might not know what that is as a user, or if I open this dashboard for the first time, but taking a look at this, at his little user guide there, I know how to read this dashboard and what I'm actually looking at. And then this user guide, right, as we think about, I feel like data products is something that's been a bigger conversation in our space, right? Well, thinking about how we can include things like everything that we need to know about our calculations, our data sources, all the attributes that go into a data product, right? Well, having a user guide like this is really important for that. So I like that I can go through my 5 steps here and understand, well, learn how a product combination is represented. And number 2, our top level KPIs provide an eagle's eye view of the multi-product usage. And then what I really like in number 3 is that he gives me the definition. Do I, if I'm new to an organization, do I know what multi-product user % is or how that's calculated? Well, he's actually given me the definition there within the dashboard so I know what I'm looking at and understand the details behind that calculation. And then number 4, I'll just call out, he has a parameter that allows us to switch between the criteria of that join or the calculation. So we can include things that are this and that, or we can switch between the things are this or that. So I think having that for my user to change the data of what they're looking at is really, really cool. All right, let's talk about number 5, testing. Waiving the home inspection. Just don't do it, right? Could you imagine moving into a new home that you wanted so bad and you waive the home inspection, and just to find out that there's a leaky faucet under the sink, the air conditioning doesn't work because you bought the house in December and you're running your heat, or all the outlets don't work for some reason, right? Just don't waive the home inspection. You wouldn't launch a dashboard without testing it and going through all the QA for it, correct? I hope not. Has anyone ever, tried to share out a dashboard or publish a dashboard and you get questions like this, right? I thought it was going to do this instead. Is it supposed to look like that? Nothing works. My favorite is when I say, hey Neil, here's my dashboard. And he goes, oh, I tried to open it and I don't have access to it, right? Thinking about as you share those things out, trying to keep all that in mind and test that before you hit launch. So here are kind of my 6 things to do when it comes to testing. Data accuracy and validation, super important. Can users trust your data? Is it correct, right? If you're building out calculations, don't just write the calculation and throw it into a chart. Really go through and validate that that calculation is working as expected. Functionality and interactivity, super important. My filters, if I'm dropping a filter on a dashboard, should it be filtering the whole dashboard? Should it just be filtering 1 or 2 worksheets? Everything from this data source, right? Make sure and go through and test out all your filters that they're filtering your dashboard in the way that you expect it to. Performance and load time. I'm going to dive a little bit more deeper into this in just a second, and kind of a little trick that we can use. But I'm sure a lot of us have had situations at work where a stakeholder says, hey, this dashboard is loading so slow, right? They're just going to disengage. They're not going to use it. So thinking about ways that we can improve the performance and load time of our work. User experience and navigation. Again, making sure that if we have buttons within our dashboard, are they set up correctly? When I click on them, are they taking me to the right dashboard that I set them up or labeled it as? Again, the user experience, just going through, is it, when I click on something, is it clicking to filter if you told me that? So thinking about just that user experience, especially for individuals that might have those different levels of data literacy, or more of my non-technical users versus my advanced users. Responsiveness and compatibility. This is something that I'm very opinionated about when it comes to Tableau. I have individuals that ask to see this on a tablet or mobile view, and if you've ever built a dashboard before, you know that sometimes that requires a lot of extra rebuilding to get a mobile view or a tablet view. So that's always something that I like to have a conversation with my leadership. It's like, do we really need it to be on a phone? Like, is there another way that I can just give you the KPIs versus like the whole dashboard on your phone? Like, do you need to do everything? So the responsiveness and compatibility is something to definitely consider and talk through. And finally, security and access. Luckily, I don't need to worry about this because I have a whole team that does this for me, but making sure that who you're sharing this with, they're allowed to see the data, the right people have access. All right, so this is a dashboard that I published really recently. I got an Oura Ring this year. I have a Smart Scale and Apple Watch, and I was like really on this new health kick beginning of the year, and I wanted to pull all of my data in and kind of track how I was doing. So I was really happy with the end result and just like seeing my trends and everything. But before I hit publish on this, I wanted to make sure that it was optimized for my end user. So within Tableau Desktop, there's an option for performance monitoring. So you just have to click on server and then run optimizer. And what that optimizer is going to do is it's going to check your dashboard for workbook performance. It's going to provide some actionable recommendations, and then based off those recommendations, it should help with your load time. So this may be a little bit hard to see on the screen, but after I hit run, I had 16 things that it checks for that passed, which is great, out of the 20 things that it checks for, but I had 4 that need review. One of them was just the number of views in my dashboard, so I had a lot of worksheets, but as I clicked around, my performance wasn't really impacted, so I was okay there. Multiple connections in my data source. I did have 3 different data sources, but I only had about 90 rows, so even though they gave me a warning about that, the performance was still really good, so that's something I didn't have to worry about. Something about LOD calculations, calculation length. So I did have one calculation where it was pretty long and detailed. So I kind of went back to the drawing board and reworked that, and was able to come up with a different way to get to the same result. So although these 4 things just needed a review, they weren't really impacting my performance, but I'm happy that Tableau gave me the option to go back and look before sharing this out. So definitely get in the habit of doing this. It runs really quickly and gives you a lot of great information and detail. I think one of the things that pops up here is hiding your unused fields. So if that's something that you're not doing, that's a great way to improve your performance as well. All right, so putting it all together, owning a home and building a dashboard is a learning process. You're not going to get it right the first time, but I hope that if you follow some of these pitfalls that I've learned, we can continue to build better dashboards together. So here are our 5 tips just summarized. Organization, right? Structure your dashboards with a logical flow, important insights front and center, those KPIs at the top. Consistency. Consistency builds trust, so make sure that your dashboards maintain a universal flow throughout, creating a cohesive and professional look. Again, are my filters in the same place throughout my dashboard? Is my design and layout of everything consistent? Our functionality, we want to make sure that users can explore our data in a meaningful way by going through filters, having that extra information in the tooltip. So really incorporating those different ways that my user can go from the what of my numbers to the why in the change and answer their business questions. Context, make sure we're incorporating user guides or some type of style guide or just information about the dashboard, whether that's in the overlay that we saw in the one dashboard or whether that's just in a Word document or something like that. But make sure we have that extra context so our users know how to use our dashboard, making sure our labels and annotations, anything like that, there's a little bit more information rather than just a number or label there. And finally, testing, always validate. Don't waive the home inspection. Make sure that your data is accurate, test usability, and check performance before launching it out, just to ensure a smoother user experience. All right, so a little bit cheesy here at the end, but just like a home is made of a solid foundation, blueprints, planning, good design, so are our dashboards, right? Solid data sources, wireframes, so we know how we're gonna build things, blueprints for our dashboard, and then our actual build. And just like dashboards just like our homes need maintenance and updates over time, so do our dashboards. So don't neglect that. Make sure that you're updating your targets and things every year. So definitely something to think about as well. So if we can understand these parallels between all the things that go into building that solid foundation to the actionable insights, I guarantee you that you'll be able to deliver dashboards to your end users and help them answer those strategic business questions. So if you want to keep the conversation going, just a reminder, my name's Eric Bolish. You can connect with me in all these places, LinkedIn, X, Blue Sky. I do have a YouTube channel that I kind of do some tutorials on there for my community project, or through my website, the Tableau Student Guide. I know that's a lot of places, so connect with me in one of those. Love to keep the conversation going. And finally, I know we're getting to the end of Tableau conference, so I hope you enjoyed everything that you learned this week. Thank you for taking time out of your last day to be with me. I really appreciate it.